So going one by one into those steps. The first one is selection. So this is often an unconscious experience. And so the first thing that we want to understand is that in each moment, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of potential things we could be noticing. We could be noticing the little dust bunny over under something. We could be noticing the temperature of the room. We could be noticing, a particular object, a sound, taste and experience. There's lots of things that we could be engaging with. But there's going to be something about the experience that's arising that our awareness is going to be drawn to. And what I'm drawn to, what my awareness is drawn to, may be something different than what you might notice and what your awareness might be drawn to. And so this is often an unconscious thing. And when we look at the process of what we're going to be talking about, we're really looking at understanding our perception of reality based upon various conditioned responses that we have, which in tantric and in yoga, you probably have heard this term before. We're talking about the process of karma, that there are different karmic patterns that are showing up with us. And for now, we can just think of karma as being kind of conditioned responses. We've had experiences in the past, they remind us of things, and we kind of tend to operate based upon those patterns for better or for worse sometimes. But the thing we want to understand is that what we're noticing isn't random. We're not just noticing random things. Our awareness is actually being drawn to specific experiences or objects because there is a karmic predisposition to notice those things. So we want to start thinking about, other kinds of experiences. So you may have had in the past an experience. I know I've talked to people, I've had it myself, of, thinking about buying a new toy, like I'm going to buy a new phone or I'm going to buy a new car. And all of a sudden I start noticing all of these cars and phones everywhere that I've never paid attention to. Like I've never thought about that model of car, but suddenly they're everywhere, right? Because now I'm thinking about getting one. And so there's something happening in the way that my mind and my awareness is working that's sort of focused on that. It's kind of looking for that as kind of an affirmation. Our selection process is often based upon karmic patterning itself and can also be influenced by the state of mind or our emotional state. So as we are experiencing something, we're going to be noticing things that are in alignment with the karmic patterns that are kind of being triggered in the moment. So from a tantric understanding, our attention is drawn based upon karmic predisposition. We tend to notice things that already fit into our karmic narrative of reality and self. And we tend to notice things that support the story that we're already telling ourselves about ourselves and the world and other people. And so if our narrative is that the world is an unsafe place, then we tend to notice things which reinforce this notion. So as an example, if you're walking down a dark alley, you might be more inclined to notice potential dangers versus if you are at the beach with friends, you might be more inclined to notice the beauty of nature and attractive bodies and pina coladas and other kinds of things that make it an enjoyable experience. So there's a state of mind, a state of being that's kind of conditioning what you're looking for, what you're expecting to happen, or what you might be afraid of happening at a particular experience. So that's the first part of the process, is we're selecting something. We're choosing an object, an experience, something that we're noticing through our senses that we're bringing into awareness. The next stage of the process is what's referred to as organization. So once a stimulation or a stimulus is chosen for us, the brain processes sensory information and constructs a mental representation of the thing that you've now brought into awareness. So if something is familiar to us, we tend to throw it into the I know what that is bucket. We kind of assume things about it based upon our past experiences of it. And so this organization can be based upon things like gender association, stereotypes, general associations of similarities, things being close together, getting grouped into a single thing. There's lots of different ways that our mind tries to organize these things. And so from the tantric understanding, we recognize that our past karmic patterns are causing us to associate what we're bringing into awareness. So we subconsciously assume things about what we're observing based upon perceived similarities between the current objects of awareness and the past experiences of the associations that we may have had. So for instance, sometimes people will get sick from a specific food or maybe a form of alcohol, and they will decide based upon their association with the bad fish or the really strong whiskey or whatever it was that made them sick, that it becomes an association of feeling ill. I've met plenty of people that are like, I would never drink that again, or I will never eat that again. And you may have your own thing of the thing that you never will eat again or never drink again. But that becomes, part of the association. So there is the selection of the object of, in this case, the at least the idea or maybe the smell of the food that we no longer want to eat. It is organized into our network of experiences, which says, oh no, not that again. And then the third experience, the third layer of this process of perception is interpretation. And so based upon our karmic patterns that are connected to our cultural values, our needs, our desires, our beliefs, experiences, expectations, involvements, self-concept, and other personal influences, we begin to interpret the experience that's arising for us. So the tantric understanding here is that the mind then tells a story about the object or experience that's formed by the karmic patterns. The story and the identification with the story and actions taken then reinforce these karmic patterns for us. So we start to tell ourselves the story that's based upon the thing that we already believe is what starts to happen. It becomes sort of a self-fulfilling kind of prophecy in a sense in certain occasions. And so the other thing to understand is that the term that is oftentimes used for our sense of individual self, which is sometimes referred to as the ego, the ego structure, the ego sense of self and identity is actually formed by these stories and by these karmic patterns. So when we look at the experience of self from a certain perspective in tantric teachings, the entire sense of just us being an individual in the world is actually formed by all these karmic patterns and experiences, and ultimately the stories that we've created out of them. And we start to think of ourselves as a bundle of experience of, these are my stories, this is my past, this is the future I'm headed to, these are the things I like. All these forms of identity start to become part of the narrative that actually strengthens the idea of us being only limited to a small individual self. Whereas the invitation in wisdom traditions, including Tantra, is to be able to expand our awareness, to understand ourselves as what some people will call spirit. And the tradition that I use in Tantra oftentimes refer to the nature of our true self as being awareness or being consciousness. Some people might call that God, and some people might call it spirit. But awareness or consciousness is part of the deeper understanding of what our true nature is from this tradition and these teachings, and can be directly experienced. And so that includes our experience of the individual being and the ego structure, but there's something beyond us that allows us to be able to experience that, and we're not limited to that. But the ego itself, just the idea of the character, is formed by these stories and these karmic patterns. And so this process of selection, organization, and interpretation becomes an unconscious, for most people, an unconscious process in terms of the way that we are interacting with the world. Something comes into our awareness, we organize it into things that seem familiar to that, we then create a story or an interpretation of what that means, what it is. And so the process leads to a construction of reality that can be classified in two different ways.